Hello, and welcome. Welcome, everyone, to our Lunchbox webinar series. We'd like to acknowledge our partner, the Lifetime Foundation, for sponsoring this webinar event, and thank them for supporting Chef Ann Foundation programs. We're so glad to be here with you today. It's a very opportune time for this webinar topic because it's National School Lunch Week. Held the second week in October each year, National School Lunch Week, it's an opportunity for school meal programs and child nutrition advocates like yourselves to involve students and families in conversations and events on healthy eating. So it's a very timely topic. Again, we're really excited to be with you today. Today's webinar will focus on parent advocacy and ways parents can get involved in school food change. Here at the Chef Ann Foundation, we want to inspire and educate and activate parents to advocate for better school food in their communities. That's why we created the Parent Advocacy Toolkit in partnership with our friends at the Whole Kids Foundation to provide parents and community members the resources they need to get educated, to get organized, and to take action. Today, Chef Ann Foundation CEO Mara Fleischman joins us to share her journey as a concerned parent and the resources we have available to help you affect change on the local level. So let's get started with some introductions. I am Curry Rosado, and I am the Chef Ann Foundation's Director of Programs, where here in this position, I oversee all of our programs. Before starting with the foundation, I was working with Chef Ann Cooper at the Boulder Valley School District as the School Food Project Program Manager. Running the webinar today is Emily Miller, our Marketing and Education Manager, and Emily Gallivan, our Administrative and Programs Associate. Our presenter today is Mara Fleischman, Chef Ann Foundation's Chief Executive Officer. After becoming involved in school food as a very concerned parent, which you'll hear about, Mara served on the Chef Ann Foundation Board of Directors from the very beginning. She then transitioned to the Executive Director role in March of 2013, and now we're so happy that she is our Chief Executive Officer of the Foundation. In this role, Mara supervises all Chef Ann Foundation staff, and she is responsible for our program development and oversight, national partnerships, strategic planning, and our organizational growth. Mara has nearly 20 years of experience working in natural products, including 12 years with Whole Foods Market, where she served most recently as the National Director of Partnerships. Mara is dedicated to educating people regarding the benefits of healthy food, and she's spoken about sustainable business practices on many panels, including Yale University and also at the University of Colorado School of Business, where she was a guest lecturer. We are all excited to be here today sharing the Parent Advocacy Initiative tools and resources with you. And we really want to thank you for spending your time out of your busy day with us today. So before we get started, I wanted to go over a few housekeeping notes, including our agenda. So today on our webinar, we will go through some housekeeping. I'll share with you a little bit about the Chef Ann Foundation. Mara will present us with the Parent Advocacy Initiative. We'll talk about some additional ways to get involved, #RealSchoolFood and the Real School Food Challenge. And we are excited to leave about 15 minutes for questions at the end of our presentation. So before we get started, let's just go over a few housekeeping notes. We have a large group of participants today, and as I mentioned, we'll try to allow at least 10, hopefully 15 minutes for questions after the presentation is over. Emily Miller and Emily Gallivan are going to be tracking the questions, and we really want to encourage you to type your questions as you think of them. Don't feel like you have to wait until our presentation is complete. You can type a question in the box below the Ask drop-down menu in the Q&A panel. Leave the recipient as all panelists and click Send. If you have any technical issues during our presentation, you can also type those into the Q&A, and we'll be happy to assist you. All right, so let's get started. First, I'd like to share a little bit about the Chef Ann Foundation. We were founded in 2009 by Chef Ann Cooper, a pioneer in school food reform. The Chef Ann Foundation helps schools ensure that children across America have access to fresh, healthy food at school. Our expertise lies in providing the operational support, technical assistance, and online resources to affect school change. By providing school food operators and their school communities with tools, training, resources, and funding through our grants programs, we really do work to help schools create healthier school food and redefine their lunchroom environments. Our vision is to help schools take action so that every child has access to fresh food every day. Today, we're really excited to share that we've reached over 7,000 schools and 2.6 million students across the nation in all 50 states. We are committed to providing schools with funding through programs like the School Food Support Initiative, Project Produce, and Let's Move Salad Bars to Schools. And you'll hear about those later. So now I'd like to move into, and we're excited to share with you, the Parent Advocacy Program and Parent Advocacy Toolkit. This program has the tools and resources available through our Parent Advocacy Initiative. And at that point, I'll turn the webinar over to Mara. Mara, welcome. We're so glad you're here with us today, and we can't wait to hear from you.
Hey, everyone. This is Mara. Thanks for joining us. This is one of the topics that gets me really excited because it's the topic that got me involved in school food. So thanks for that great introduction, Curry, and I'm really excited to have folks on the phone and on this webinar who are really interested to understand how they can work with their schools and their districts to change school food. So I just want to tell you a little bit about how I got here, because I think that it's relevant potentially to maybe what some of you guys are going through. So in 2006, my daughter, Lucy, was starting kindergarten at Boulder Valley School District. She's my first, and she is currently 15, so it's been some time. I went into lunch with her one day at her kindergarten, and I sat down, and she had gotten school food and school lunch, and what they had served her was what looked like to me to be processed French toast sticks with a packet of maple syrup that actually had no syrup in it. It was high fructose corn syrup and a lot of sugar. And on the side was some pears and kind of a light syrupy sauce. Now, at the time, we had just moved to Boulder, and this is in Colorado, and we had moved from Massachusetts. And one of the things that I didn't understand at the time, because she was my first into school, was the difference in state-to-state funding of school districts. So basically, when we got here, Lucy had 29 kids in her kindergarten class with one teacher. And I started looking around the lunchroom, and I saw all of the kids that were in Lucy's class plus other classes, and I looked at the lunch, and I thought to myself, okay, this is kindergarten. These kids are learning to read right now. How is a teacher going to take 29 of these kids back to classroom and teach them to read after a lunch like this? So that kind of started me on the path to look for people in our community that were trying to create change in school food. And I found a small group of community members, parents mostly, that were meeting regularly to discuss and try and engage with the district about how to change school food. And that really kind of was the start of the change in the school food at Boulder Valley. And I say this because I know that the question I get asked most frequently when I'm either talking or traveling is how can parents do this? They feel like they're engaging with, they're trying to engage with their districts, but they're kind of not really getting there, and they feel like they're being pushed up against walls, and that they're not getting the answers they deserve, and they're getting frustrated, and some of them are giving up. And you know, I can definitely say I felt that way, and the people in the group that I was in felt that way. And I think it was, those of us that were resilient in that group, that stuck with it and kept trying to work with the district and not kind of condemn the district, that were able to stick with it and ultimately create change. So now, about 10 years later, Lucy is at Boulder High School, and Boulder Valley School District has one of the best school food programs in the country. And how do I, there's no list out there of best school food programs, although I would say with the work the Chef Ann Foundation does with schools across the country, we have a pretty good idea of what schools are doing great work. But the way I personally define it is that they are being provided fresh, whole foods with fresh fruits and vegetables every day, and that they have a wellness policy in place that supports healthy school food. And so I want to, that whole story basically, when I started with the Chef Ann Foundation, helped to guide what we created here as the Parent Advocacy Initiative and the Parent Advocacy Toolkit. So the Whole Kids Foundation, which is this amazing foundation, they saw the need for this too, so they funded this project for us. I just want to give a shout out to them because they are the sponsors of this initiative. So I just want to take you through a couple of the stats around the state of our nation and why school food is so important. So basically right now, we're facing a health crisis in our nation and with our kids. And so 34% of the calories in kids' cereals come from sugar, if you can believe that or not. And so many kids are going to school on sugar. And just to give you kind of an understanding of the sugar situation, in the Iraq and Afghan wars, there were 1,500 limb amputations because of issues. From diabetes alone, there's been 1.5 million. Also, just to kind of circle back, the CDC says that 1 in 3 children born in 2000 will get diabetes in their lifetime and be insulin dependent by 2020. This generation would be the first generation in our history to die at a younger age than their parents. It's kind of crazy what we're seeing. Cancer is the leading cause of disease-related death in our country, and 19 to 50% of Americans are expected to contract cancer, and cancer is 90% preventable, and it's proven over and over, and diet's a huge piece of that. In the past 25 years, the prevalence of childhood obesity has tripled. So you can see that, health is a huge issue right now that we're facing. And I wanted to give people that kind of overview because school food plays a huge part in the health of our children. Now, a lot of people ask me, some people don't even understand what the National School Lunch Program is. So I want to just briefly touch base on this. The National School Lunch Program is a federally assisted meal program that operates in public and nonprofit private schools across the country, and they provide balanced, low-cost, or free lunches. In this, the National School Lunch Program, which was started by the National School Lunch Act, was signed into law in 1946 by President Truman. And it's funny because the impetus for the National School Lunch Program is because 40% of the World War II recruits were rejected because of poor nutrition, and that's why it was started. And today I think it serves a very different purpose. One of the greatest things of current times was the Healthy Hunger Free Kids Act, which was passed in 2010. This was some of the most progressive school lunch legislation ever passed, and it increased requirements for fruits and vegetables, for whole grains. It decreased sodium, and it decreased things like saturated fats. Now, this legislation was supposed to be reauthorized in September of 2015. but it is still being debated, and it's definitely a little bit of a partisan issue. And I think, I want to make sure people really understand school lunch, because when you go, if you're really trying to change your school food program, when you go and talk with your district, the thing I can say definitively is that you need to be educated. Because if you go in and you're not educated about the topic, they kind of dismiss your concerns. So, just to talk about school food, currently in our country, there are just over 30 million lunches served every day. And I'm sorry, I'm going to turn to the Parent Advocacy Toolkit for you guys so you guys can see this before I go on. So there are 30 million lunches served every day. Of the 30 million lunches, 22 million lunches are served to kids on the free and reduced lunch program. And when you kind of look at that, you can see that there are 5 billion school lunches served in total, which is insane. There's $12.9 billion spent on school lunches. So what does that look like for your school and for your kids' lunch? Well, I mean, here's a large stat. There's over $11 billion spent, like I just said, per year in school lunches. And there's over $260 billion spent in diet-related illness. So if you compare that, it's crazy. A school lunch sometimes comes down to no more than 12 dimes, $1.20. So there is, so schools spend about $1.20 on food costs per lunch. Can you believe that? Think about that, $1.20. Think about what you buy in your world for $1.20. There's really not much, not even the coffee you get in the morning. But that's what we are allocating for food costs for our kids. What does the bigger picture look like? Well, so the federal reimbursement rate is about $3.25. And when we start to kind of break that down, what does it look like? So on the high end, schools can spend up to about $1.40 on food costs, and then $1.60 goes to labor and overhead. On the low end, schools are spending about 85 cents on food costs, with about $2.15 on labor and overhead. So, we have a lot here around on our Parent Advocacy Initiative Toolkit around the guidelines for school lunches and around all of this information. But it's really going to help you to understand what the current guidelines are. So 3/4 to 1 cup of vegetables need to be offered per day. 1/2 to 1 cup of fruit need to be offered per day. All grains need to be whole grain rich, and all of this information is here in the Parent Advocacy Initiative. So, some of the changes that we saw coming out of the Healthy Hunger Free Kids Act is that we see less saturated fats, less unhealthy fats, less salt, fewer calories. We have now requirements on low and non-fat dairy. We have increased fruits and veggies and more whole grains, and that is great, and we need to keep that up. So now let's get into the Parent Advocacy Toolkit. So, based on my experience, I really felt like, and talking to parents across the country about this, because when I went through this in Boulder, I started to talk to parents across the country. And since then, since I've taken the role at the Chef-Ann Foundation, honestly, it's one of the most frequent emails, phone calls we get. So it really broke this down into 3 sections. The first is get educated, the second is get organized, and the third is take action. And then we have kind of a tool for home use at the end, but that's just kind of your, that's added value. So looking at kind of the first step, which is getting educated. So this webinar is a great first step to starting to learn about school food. And some of the stuff that I just talked about, so you can see here under understanding school food infographics. So this is a really great digestible infographic for you that goes over a lot of what I just spoke about. So you can download this, you can look at it, you can share it. And then right here is a lot of research and articles in the media about school food and about the Healthy Hunger Free Kids Act, like I mentioned before, about the National School Lunch Program, but also more recent school food articles. And school food's been a hot topic over the last 5, 6, 7 years. Really, since the Healthy Hunger Free Kids Act authorization in 2010, it's really taken a front and center news approach. And our First Lady, Michelle Obama, was the one who really pushed for that regulation, and it was kind of under her impetus that got pushed. So we are seeing a lot of media coverage on school food. And then I just want to show you, I'm not going to go too fast, I know. I don't want to get you guys dizzy. This is one of the most important things under the Get Educated process, and that is getting to know your school lunch program. So definitely the first step is going to have lunch with your child at school. That is definitely the first step. That when I've told people that before, they have come back to me to just say, wow, I wish I had done that 2 years ago, 3 years ago, 5 years ago, because it's the most kind of experiential education you can get. And when you do that, we have some things for you to look at when you go to have school lunch. So, we have these areas that you should kind of look at before you go in to have school lunch with your child. What is the process for getting the food? What are the lunch lines like? Is there a salad bar? Do kids get to choose what they eat? Because we know choice is really important, and especially when you're trying to get kids to eat healthier food. And so this is a great tool right here to help you as you go into your school lunch experience. And I'm going to go here. So the other thing to look at is a wellness policy. So now through the Healthy Hunger Free Kids Act, every school is required to have a wellness policy. And you need to request the wellness policy from your district. It won't be from your school, it will be from your district. So that's another great clarification, is that a lot of parents don't realize that school food is run through the district, not the school. So schools themselves, your principal, has very little kind of governance over school food. Your district will have a food service director, and that food service director and the superintendent will be setting kind of the protocols and policies for school food. And if you request your wellness policy, I think you'll be able to get an understanding. And we also have some sample wellness policies on this site that you can look at, particularly from Boulder Valley, which really, they went through a big visionary process to create their wellness policy. And it's often a place that parents can start to work with the district. The next step in looking at trying to affect change within your school lunch program is getting organized. And this is at the point where you kind of have to start assembling a group of community stakeholders. So, this section was really interesting when we created it, but when you go to assemble your group, you really have to identify collaborators and gather this advocacy group. And we give you some information here about why you need to form this group, about tips on forming the group, and who you should reach out to. I think parents who care are obvious. But I also think that there's other people within the community that really need to have a stake in this group that you're forming. And school board members, so, I would say one of the other things that I say to people that is the most important part of this process, the get organized process, is finding a school board member or a member of the district administration that is your champion. Without that, school food reform becomes very difficult. It is plain as that. You need someone in administration or the school board who sees the opportunity and is passionate about the change, because it is not going to be easy. I mean, it is not going to be easy. From the day that I started my meetings with the community group in Boulder Valley, it took us 3 years to even get someone on board that would start the change. And it took us 4 or 5 years before change even started to happen. So it was in the case of the parent community in Boulder Valley, it was the CFO in administration that was our advocate, and she was our champion. And without her, I just don't know how far we would have been able to get. So this is really important. Holding the kickoff meeting. So once you get your group, we have a lot of information here about holding your kickoff meeting and sample agendas and discussion items. It's really important. I think those of you who who work and have meetings, corporate meetings, and understand how you have to keep an agenda and keep the focus on, because a lot of times people are so passionate about this, they can get off topic, and it can kind of spin out into a session of, talking about all the things that people don't like about school food. You have to stay focused. You have to find the goals for the group, and you have to be really clear with your administration about what those goals are, because what they hear a lot is they hear parents complaining. But if parents come in with very specific goals about things they want to change, and if they take it from a very professional level, it ends up being much better. And this is about holding regular meetings and kind of the progression of agenda items. So this will help you too. Then the last section here in take action. This is the biggest part of the take action section is setting the first meeting with administration. So before you do that, one of the things that you really need to do as a group is you need to understand not only what are some of the other schools that are doing it right across the country doing, but what's available to your school for funding opportunities to help you change your school food program. Now, the Chef Ann Foundation is a great place. We have a lot of grant opportunities for schools, for salad bars, for fruit and veggie grant opportunities. We even have a school food support initiative, which actually helps schools change from heat and serve to cook from scratch. It's a 2-year program, and we accept, like this year, the grant is currently open, and we are accepting applications, and we have enough funds to grant 7 districts into this cohort. It's a 2-year program. It is kind of the ultimate. There are a lot of requirements, but the biggest piece to that one is that your food service director and your district administration have to be fully on board. And that's actually really prevalent and in need in all of these grant applications. So all of these grant applications require your food service director at the district to sign off. So it's good for you to know about this stuff in the take action, because when you go in to speak with the district, it's good for you to be able to talk about the opportunities that are out there for schools. Then here, connecting with district decision makers and key influencers. This really takes you through it, and it's it's not just kind of facts, but it's also how you need to approach it. Who you need to approach. What are some of the common arguments that administration will have against progressive school food reform? If I had this before I went into the meetings, it would have been a huge help for me, because I had to kind of leave the meetings, go back, think about it, and then reapproach and so did a lot of folks on the committee. But if we had known what the barriers to entry were going to be before those meetings, it would have helped us a lot. And then, you know, what is your ask going to be? That's all part of the lead up to this. But planning out your meeting, what your ask is going to be, and understanding what the common arguments are and what your response could be. So there's a lot of great information here. And then let's take you over here. So the stuff here is for, it's just general additional things that we know parents who are eager to change school food and are attentive to food and nutrition issues in their home are interested in. We have all these home recipes here from Chef Ann, and they're great. It's actually probably the most accessed part of our site, so people love these home recipes. The Healthy Kids Meal Wheel, which really talks about, and this was developed by Chef Ann too. It's actually in the Smithsonian, and it really kind of helps. It's a guide for you guys if you're trying to create some sort of consistency at home. This is a great Healthy Kids Nutrition Report card that some of our families have had good luck with, so that's an interesting tool there. And we're going to continue to add to this. This all continues to grow, as well as these items up here, because the more we hear from parents that are actually moving forward with their districts, the more tools and the more content that comes from them. So, you know, in the research that we have, you know, there's a study of 1 million students in New York that showed that students that ate lunches that did not include artificial additives performed better on tests than students who ate lunches that contained artificial preservatives and additives. I find that academic performance is the thing that the district is always trying to reach for. And so, again, the more educated you are about, and there's not a lot out there about the correlation between healthy food and academic performance. I'm going to tell you that right now. There's not a ton out there, but there are some that you can reference, and I think it really pays off. So that's it. This is a great start. I'm also available for any questions that I get questions all the time, email questions. Sometimes people say, can you just spare some time on the phone to talk me through this because I'm having such a tough time, and I do. A group of parents at Boston Public School I've been working with for a while, and it's really great stuff. You guys, parents and community stakeholders ultimately are the ones that are the impetus for change in school food. It is definitively bottom line. And it's not an easy challenge. But all I would say is take it piece by piece. And that's why we created this Parent Advocacy Toolkit, because if you think about it in totality, it's overwhelming. And if you can kind of go at it piece by piece and getting educated and getting organized and taking action, I think it becomes much more digestible. So I'm going to turn it back over to Curry now, and I think we're going to take questions.
Great.
Thank you.
Mara, thank you so much. It was so informative and very motivational. So we definitely are going to move into questions, but before we do, we wanted to just share with you a couple of platforms at the Chef Ann Foundation where you also can get involved, in addition to using Parent Advocacy Toolkit tools and resources. We wanted to let you know about a couple of other initiatives going on. One is the #RealSchoolFood campaign. Each October, we launch this awareness campaign where we engage celebrities and chefs and parents and good food advocates all across the country to bring attention to one key issue, that issue being that our children deserve real, healthy school food every day that's cooked from scratch and made with fresh ingredients. So we just wanted to invite you to participate. It's really fun. We hope you have fun with it. Spread the word. We thank you for that. And to learn more about it, as you can see here on the screen, you can go to realschoolfood.org and learn how to get involved. And we hope you do. Also, we wanted to share with you a really fun opportunity called the Real School Food Challenge. And this is really a way locally to raise awareness for healthy school food, and at the same time to raise funds for the work that the Chef Ann Foundation is doing. Again, it's called the Real School Food Challenge, and it's an event where home chefs, or you could choose to kick it up a notch and work with local chefs in your community. They compete, 4 people compete to create a USDA compliant school lunch. You learned about the challenges of that earlier. And we here at the Chef Ann Foundation, as you can see on the screen, have created an event toolkit to help you host an event like this and compete in an event like this. So to learn more, visit us at chefannfoundation.org. Feel free to call us with any questions. We'd love to see you get involved. It's a great event. So again, we thank you so much for your time. And before we get into our questions, which we definitely have several, so we're excited to answer those questions for you, I want to just share with you again the 2 websites, chefannfoundation.org and thelunchbox.org. Okay, so let's get into questions. One of our questions, Mara, I know you hear this quite frequently. So our advocacy group has been met with resistance from our district. What do I do?
It's the most common question. First of all, you have to check your tone. I have to say this. You know, when I started the group, right, I had been in the corporate world. I worked at Whole Foods, the global division for 12 years, and I was used to getting things done quickly, efficiently. I came in, you know, with a kind of full steam ahead, and I quickly realized that I had to take a step back. I had to really endear myself to administration, and so did the group. And that meant things weren't going to get done as quickly as I wanted them or other people wanted them to get done. And I had to come to terms with that. But one thing is you really have to check your communication and tone with your administration, and you have to find ways to speak at their level, and that's why educating yourself is so important. But also, you have to find an advocate. If you cannot find an advocate on the school board or in the administration, it is going to be challenging. And I know that, you know, I know that's challenging in itself, but that is the biggest piece of advice I can give to someone.
Great. Thanks so much. That's really helpful. The next question is, what has been the parent response in districts like Boulder Valley where this change has happened?
That's a great question. So, you know, first of all, I want to say that districts are different. So Boulder Valley School District has on average 22% of its kids on the free and reduced lunch program, okay? We, generally speaking, at the Chef Ann Foundation work with schools that are 50% or higher, okay? And what does that mean? So basically, if your school has, let's say, 70% of its kids on the free and reduced lunch program, that means that those kids are eating the lunch program on a regular basis, and it is what their parents are relying on to get them food. So they develop very specific things that they like about a lunch program, and often it is a palate for highly processed food. I'll say that. So they like the processed French toast sticks and the chicken nuggets that have 30 different ingredients in it and very little real chicken. And when change starts to happen, you can count on the fact that your participation is going to go down a little bit, and that you are going to hear from parents, particularly those that have kids that like the processed food lunch, about issues, because the issues become theirs. The kids start saying they don't want to eat lunch, and then the parents have to figure out how they can pack a lunch or not pack a lunch, and it becomes a problem. But what I can say now is that since Boulder has, and this happens with the schools that we work with across the country, after a certain percentage of time of change. So here in Boulder, it's now been 5 years. Our participation is higher than when we began. Parents are so appreciative of the food that we serve them, particularly the salad bars. We hear all the time parents come in and say, my child came home today and asked me to go out and buy red peppers because they got them on the salad bar and they've never had a red pepper before. It's a process. It takes time. And the one thing that the district is going to have to, and the reason why you need an advocate is the district is going to have to recognize the fact that it is a process.
Great, that is so helpful and also encouraging. It's a process, but it's stay the course, right? Great. So the next question is, how do you get community support, like local grants?
Yeah.
Any other tips aside from what you mentioned?
So there's going to be different stages along the way where you're going to have to raise funds. I showed you a few grants the Chef Ann Foundation has, but there's also a lot of others. There's USDA grants, equipment grants, planning grants, change grants. There's also community and state foundations here in Colorado. We have the Colorado Health Foundation. There's places like Ohio that have the Cleveland Foundation. There are community foundations all over, and a lot of times their initiatives are to support healthy eating within their community. It is a huge funding issue that's been going on for a while. Also, if your district it starts to become committed to making considerable change, meaning that they are now committed to moving from processed food to cook from scratch. Depending on where your district is, that can need a pretty large influx of funding. If your schools are only heating and serving food, they have no cooking equipment, and their staff is not trained to cook, and that cost to bring in equipment and to train staff is big. And a lot of times you have to get some funding through bonds, and that's when you start working with your city government.
Great, thanks. That's really helpful. We have a great question here and the question is, how do you get the food service director from a private company to use and support local products? Any tips on that?
Yeah, so I think what this question is talking about is, and I didn't really get into this, but it is in some of the information in the Parent Advocacy Toolkit, is that there's a number of different ways you can operate a school food program. The one we advocate for at the Chef Ann Foundation as the kind of, ultimate is that your school operates a cook from scratch program. However, there's a lot of school districts that create contracts with food service operators, private organizations like Sodexo or Revolution Foods or Whitson's. So what this question is how can we get our contractor to support more local foods? Well, a lot of times there is definite movement in some of these bigger companies like Sodexo to try and provide that. However, honestly, the way that it needs to be worked out is it has to be in the contractual agreement, and often districts will sign 2, 3, 4-year contracts with these companies, and it has to be discussed in the renegotiations.
That's really excellent, and I'm sure helpful for a lot of folks out there. Thank you. The next question is the positive response the same? The positive response to school food reform, are you hearing it's the same in city, rural, and inner city areas?
So, first of all, I just want to paint the picture here for a minute. There are 98,000 schools in our country, okay? The Chef Ann Foundation, which is a national organization that works on school food reform from an operations perspective, we work with 7,000 schools. So you can see there's actually a lot of work that needs to be done. So it's not like school food reform is the norm at all. What we find is it's not so much different from urban to rural to suburban. But what we find is that it is about who is heading up administration, and where is is the mentality of your food service director. You know, I have to say this, that because questions have come in, and I think you guys have to understand this. A lot of times food service directors feel attacked by parents. They feel like, hey, we're sitting there, I've got my whole team working to feed these kids, we love these kids, you know, we're so happy when they take their trays, and now they're saying that we're feeding them bad food, and, you know, and they feel shamed, basically. And they also don't know any different. And so what we see acceptance of school food reform, it's about the willingness of the food service director to accept there is a different way to do something. And I will say honestly, oftentimes in working with school districts, the process has been that the food service director has rotated out of that position during the process of changing school food.
Okay, thanks. The next question is a really good one also, as they all have been. How have you addressed, or what are you hearing in ways to address the high sugar content issues in the school lunch programs, like the juice, chocolate milk, et cetera?
Yeah, that's a tough one because that one hasn't been regulated as much. You know, I think a lot of us in school food reform are really hoping that was going to be part of the next iteration of the reauthorization. What I have to say is the best way to reduce the sugar in your school food program is through your wellness policy, is to address it in the wellness policy. And as your group starts to meet and starts to look at other school districts' wellness policies, you need to see how they address it and how they address kind of sugar, basically, and a cap on it, and where they see that ability. You know, Chef Ann has been, I mean, when she one of the first things she does whenever she goes into a district is she removes the chocolate milk. Chocolate milk has as high grams of sugar as soda, and it is the thing that parents and kids get the angriest about, because they feel like parents feel like if their kids are getting protein, they need to make sure they're getting protein, and kids love their chocolate milk. But Ann is she's very definitive about that. And when we guide schools, we say, you will get over that hump. You will get over that hump. And why are we serving kids chocolate milk when their sugar content is as high as soda? So I'd say wellness policy is the first thing to look at.
Yeah, great advice and good examples. The next question is, we are trying to find out where our district falls on the spectrum of good versus bad meal programs. And it's been really hard in getting ingredient lists for the food that's being served. So how do you get the district, your leadership, to show you those ingredients?
That's so funny. Ann and I were just talking about this 2 days ago, how it would be so great if the Chef Ann Foundation could somehow come out with a list annually, you know, that rated school food programs so that communities had a gauge of what was you know, what they were trying to aspire to. However, that doesn't exist. And yes, you are correct that getting the ingredients to the school food is really difficult. However, they really need to give it to you, and they will. You can be really vocal about that, and you can kind of take that to the top. They need to be able to give their community members the ingredients in the food. But that's not going to necessarily help you gauge where you fall in the spectrum of schools and school food reform. I think that, you know, there's a lot of articles, and I think that, you know, maybe even Emily can send something out after this for the attendees about lists of school food programs that have been recognized for their great progress. And I think the best thing to do is to aspire to to that level. You know, Minneapolis, Boulder Valley, Portland Unified School District in Portland, Oregon. A lot of these school districts they've been written about, and I think there's actually even a list out there. So I think I would start with that, you know. I think I would shoot for the best, you know. I would shoot for the best, and you might not get there, but at least that's kind of where you're setting your goals.
Great, thanks so much. We have time for one final question, and the question is, do you ever get students involved in this advocacy work? And if so, what age do you think is the best age to approach?
Well, that's a great question. So kids are automatically involved, right? When you change school food, they're automatically involved. Now, you're talking about advocacy work, like how can you gather kids to help change school food in a district? That is challenging. It's challenging just because kids, I don't think, can really speak articulately about something they don't have access to, you know. So they have access to what they have access to, and that's kind of what they know. However, what I will say is that there are ways to kind of start the process in talking to the kids about why food is important, and even starting different activities within your community. You know, one of the things that we have in our lunchbox is actually let's see where it is here, in marketing and education. Here we go. Marketing and education. We have our junior chefs competition program, and this is built more for when your school has started to create change, and this is getting kids together to compete to create USDA compliant school food recipes. However, what I would say is that it's a great educational opportunity even if your school is not started it. So if you as a parent community group want to create an event that helps bring awareness and help get kids involved and helps get the message out to your community, this is a great press event. This is a great event to do, and it can generate some feedback from kids about the taste of healthier school food.
Absolutely. I'm really glad to see you pointed out that junior chef competition. There was just one here locally, and it was exciting to hear the parents and the students all talking about how much they enjoy that real healthy food. Our last question, I lied, and we have time for one final question with 1 minute left. Thanks to everyone for these excellent questions. So final question is, what procurement tools are available for schools willing to change and purchase from their local community?
That's great. So first of all, we didn't talk much about the lunchbox, but the lunchbox, which is really the heartbeat of the Chef Ann Foundation, this is a portal that is for school food service operators, and it provides a ton of tools, resources, and content to help schools transition to healthier school food programming. So you can see here under procurement how much information we have. This site actually, we had to raise over $500,000 to get this site built. We have over 220 USDA compliant school food recipes that schools can use and modulate based on their district and school sizes. And what our commitment is at the Chef Ann Foundation, our commitment is to make sure these tools and resources are free to schools forever. And the Lifetime Foundation is our sponsor for this. So they sponsor this every year so that we can ensure we keep the content up to date, that we are adding to it, and that what it takes to run it is covered so that schools don't have to pay for it. So under procurement, you'll see here that we have local and regional procurement. In this section, really speaks to what you're talking about. Now, it's going to, if you're not a school food service worker, I don't know if you are or not, I don't know who asked this question. If you're not a school food service worker, it's going to be a little confusing to you because this is really written for school food operators. But if you're asking if tools are available for them, right here, this is great stuff. And here's the sourcing. Here's the sourcing page, which is really good too. So, yeah.
Great. Well, that wraps up our questions. Thank you again, Mara. Thank you again, Emily and Emily, for helping to run our webinar today. We want to, again, thank our partners at the Lifetime Foundation for their support of the Lunchbox webinar series, to the Whole Kids Foundation for the support of the Parent Advocacy Toolkit, and to all of you for your time today, for your excellent questions. And we just want to leave you with a big thanks and to encourage you to use the resources we've mentioned. We are here. Feel free to reach out via phone or email. We look forward to hearing from you. Thanks again and have a wonderful day.